joining in the session on a Saturday afternoon. All of you present here definitely know about Adhyayan. Adhyayan works in the space of supporting schools in their endeavor to provide quality education to their students. We work with schools, their managements, leaders, and teachers closely in reviewing their own practices and leading their schools to the next level. And most of you also know that Adhyayan's community of practice session, we meet through that. We meet twice a month. This is an online platform, and we meet on Saturdays to discuss relevant, pressing issues, what's happening in the environment, and we truly learn from each other. And the endeavor since April 2020 has been in creating and growing this community of, educators, so that we all come together and learn and grow from each other. So currently, if I may ask people who are there in the room, where are you in terms of your school reopening? Most of us have reopened schools, right? Maybe some yes, no, from people who are there in the room right now. We have a small number today. And Jayashree and I were just discussing some time ago, saying that looks like the opening up of, everything being opening up is definitely something that is making people's Saturdays also get busier now. And maybe that's one of the reasons. Plus, technology is so advanced that we have the session being live streamed on YouTube, and everybody is obviously free, and it's possible to then watch it at your own convenience, but nothing like obviously catching it live so that you can actually ask questions. Yeah. So yes, I've received one or two things. Yes, all schools have started, and in this last 1 month, we have been speaking to a lot of educators, and especially school leaders and coordinators. And all of them have one thing in common to say. They're all very excited to have the children back, right, in school. Some are very excited in terms of, the numbers, because it began with, low attendance, went on to high attendance. But there's one thing that has been bothering everyone, and that has been the level of learning, right? In terms of the progress that every child makes in a year. And if one were to compare that to pre-COVID time to now, they find that that progress is not as much as what it needs to be. And I have spoken to at least about, say 25 to 30 school educators in this past 1 month. And there hasn't been any single educator who said that the students are at par. It's all going fantastic. I think everyone has this large looming question and an issue to address, to say that students are at different levels right now, which they were always. I mean, we had a mixed bag in the class, but right now we find that we are not at the level where we left in the sense in the physical school. So that brings in a big question, because everyone's now trying out different ways of addressing it, right? Trying to have some small classes, small group work, trying to figure out which child has grasped how much, where are the reading levels, the writing has suffered big time. There's just so much that has happened, and everyone's trying to cope with that. And that's exactly the feedback that we've got from a lot of people, has given shape to today's session. And today's session is on actually understanding these gaps in student learning and figuring out what can be done. Because a lot of educators have already started working on it, and I'm sure people in the room here, educators in the room, have loads of ideas on what can be done and how it can be done. So today's guest and the panelists are going to focus on that, and I'd like to introduce each one to you before we move ahead. So we have Ms. Ranjana Jangara here with us, who is currently the principal of BK Birla School at Kalyan in Mumbai. And Ranjana Jangra completed her education from Delhi University. She's a passionate educationist and is working in the field of education for 29 years. She has worked in different types of schools at various positions and is a master trainer for CBSE too. Ranjana's list of the awards and the work she does is pretty exhaustive, but I'd still like to quote some of them. Is that she's received an Innovative Principal Award at Plan, organized by Shaping India. She's been recognized as one of the 50 effective principals across India by Education Today in 2021. Congratulations, Ranjana, for all of that. And she's also recognized as the change maker by Aditya Birla Education Academy for introducing innovative teaching strategies to enhance 21st century skills of students. She also she was featured by the great principals in an interactive session with Ms. Seema Choraya. So Seema, if I were to Ranjana, if I were to actually say in a nutshell and describe her, is that she is a self-motivated, positive, and quality-driven person. She loves to be with children as it gives her a lot of positive energy to work. So thank you, Ranjana, for making it in today's session. And we look forward to learning from you in this session. The next person on the panel is Mrs. Sangeeta Bhattacharya. And Ms. Sangeeta Bhattacharya is the principal and headmistress of St. Joseph's High School in Badala, again in Mumbai. It's a state board school, and she has been in this institute from 1990, having joined as a teacher and then slowly learned the works and has, become the supervisor of the school, and then has become the headmistress and now the principal. Sangeeta says that the pandemic has been a challenge for everyone, and she has been quick in her thinking, and the strategic administrative skills helped her to actually get onto the online classes right from junior KG to standard 10 on Microsoft Teams. A lot of extracurricular activities, the classes for the bridge course and the students of the SETTS courses were also conducted online with her help and guidance. Sangeeta has always encouraged teachers to upgrade themselves and through various training programs. The USP of St. Joseph's High School is KYC. We all know what KYC is, right? Know your customer. And in this case, it is know your child. And that's the brainchild of Sangeeta. So thank you, Sangeeta, for making it. And we look forward to hearing again from you, what has your journey been like? The third person on our panel is Mr. Nishchal Shukla. Nishchal Shukla leads the content development and pedagogical research team at Educational Initiatives, India's leading education research organization and one of the largest assessment companies in the world. The content development team focuses on creating high quality assessment and learning content for various products and solutions, and goes deep into understanding what to assess, how to assess, and how to make sense of the data that's coming from the assessments. The pedagogical research team goes deeper into understanding how students think and how they learn different concepts, and this is something that guides the teachers. So with over 16 years of experience in this domain of assessments and learning solutions, he's been a part of the founding teams for various of EI initiatives like the MindSpark, the detailed assessment, and has also executed large-scale projects within and outside India. So part of the team working with the Knowledge and Human Development Authority, Dubai, Ministry of Education, UAE, and Sharjah Private Education Authority to bring change in the learning levels of students in the UAE. So if you notice that today's panel has educational initiatives here with us who has worked in the field of assessments, and that has been pre-COVID, has always been working. We have two schools where, the Birla School and St. Joseph's has also been working with educational initiatives using some of these assessments And what we're going to look forward today to is hearing from them as to what and how have these kind of assessments actually helped the students' learning, and what has been the journey of two educators using these initiatives, and are they useful, how are they useful, and what are the challenges that come their way. Okay, so I think the first thing that we would like to do right now is, let's put it on the chat. I'll just request Annette here to put the link on the chat, the Mentimeter link, is to say that what's the purpose of assessments? Let's begin from the basics. What's the purpose of assessments? Yeah, we have the Mentimeter link. So request everyone to get onto the Mentimeter link, and let's put in our responses. Time and again, we have had requests and questions on assessments saying that, okay, what about assessments? How do we do them in the online space? How do we figure out what are good assessments? So I'm sure that assessments is in the, on top of everyone's priority list. Okay, so we have some responses here. What is the purpose of assessments? To find learning gaps, identify the gaps, to know where learning has taken place, to know the learning gaps of misconceptions, find remedial measures to reduce the learning gaps. Brilliant. And if somebody is not able to access and would like to put it in the chat or just unmute and say something, you could go ahead and do that. So while this is on, and the Mentimeter link is going to be live, if you want to access and put in, please go ahead. Yes, purpose of assessments is solutions. Assessment is not of learning, but for learning. Okay, we'll come to that as well. And understand, what does it mean if it's not of learning? What do we mean by for learning? Great. So let's hear it from our panelists as well. And I would pose the question to the panel here right now to say that, what's the purpose of assessments? What's the importance of assessments, and what's the importance of the questions in those assessments? Because we know that the assessments largely is made up of questions. And I think the question, would Ms. Ranjana want to take it up first?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Neha. You have asked that what is the importance of assessment? Why do we assess? So assessment is extremely important, basically to understand whether learning objectives are met or not. In fact, when we teach, we have certain learning objectives in mind. When teacher plans his or her lesson, there are learning objectives in mind. So basically assessment is done to check, to see that learning objectives are met or not. Or if they are met, then up to what extent? Whether child has an idea of the concept or deeper understanding of it, or it is just a superficial kind of knowledge. So that is to be checked. In fact, that is to be assessed. Whether child will be able to apply that concept in life whenever required. So these are some of the questions I feel which must be answered adequately by a quality assessment. So this is the importance of assessment, in fact, and this is how assessment is to be done.
Yeah, I believe you are on mute. Sorry.
Am I on mute?
No, I was on mute. So thank you. This is what typically happens, right? In spite of the fact that we've been using this now since 2 years. So yeah, thank you very much for kind of putting it in a nutshell. And I also remember in our call prior where you were talking about different kinds of assessments, right? In terms of, and that's a reference that we saw in the Mentimeter in terms of assessment of learning for learning. So would you like to share a little bit on that, Ranjana, before we go to Nishta? Yeah.
Yes, sure. See, based on this came in the Mentimeter answer also, one of them wrote about this as well. See, based on the assessment, how it is designed and what is the purpose. In fact, we can broadly put them in 3 categories, I can say. The first is assessment of learning. So I will not say right now which is good, which is not good, which is best. So every type of assessment which I'm just going to share has its own importance, depending upon, as I said, the purpose. So first is the type assessment of learning. So our assessment, our summative tests, year-end exams, and any kind of structured exams conducted once or twice in a year, they all come under this category where we do assessment of learning. And this is the assessment which gives you the grades or marks, and which can be compared with last year performance or this year performance with other schools or in the locality. But it does not give an opportunity to the teachers to improvise the learning or to strategize teaching or to redesign the method of teaching. This assessment does not give this opportunity because teaching has already completed, because most of the time it is summative assessment, most of the time it is year-end assessment either. So you can't do anything. So it just helps to understand the overall performance of the school or the class, or for the comparison purpose, it is conducted. Then the next type of assessment which comes is the assessment as learning. Now, when assessment as learning happens, when students become self-assessors, they assess their own performance, they assess their own learning, and they are able to identify their own way of learning, their own style of learning, their own way of thinking. How do they think? What is the thought process when they read something, when they learn something? So they understand their own way of thinking, and they reflect more often, and they are able to think of the remediation also. They know that this is how I can improve, and this basically leads to the metacognition also. So children become more responsible, definitely, and they take the ownership of their own learning when assessment happens as learning. So what is the role of a teacher here? Teacher here is just to facilitate and guide the students. So this is what is assessment as learning. Now, the most important and widely recommended by educators is the assessment for learning. So the purpose of assessment, as we discussed earlier, is to learn and improve the teaching strategies based on the gaps which are identified. It is conducted when we are assessing for learning, then it is conducted very frequently while teaching itself. So it is not year-end kind of assessment, it is along with teaching, like formative assessment. Rather, it becomes a part of teaching learning process itself. It is diagnostic, it gives immediate feedback to the teacher whether students are learning or they are on right track or not. The advantage is that teacher can design or modify his or her methodology or teaching strategy if there is a need. So this is what is the assessment for learning. Here I would like to give an example or an analogy, that is, it is like baking a cake. While preparing dough, we always check the sweetness and other ingredients, whether they are put in the correct proportion or not, before we put it in the oven. And if any ingredient or sweet is less, or something is missing, or something is less, we always try to, we can fix it. We can do something to get the desired result, a good cake. The desired result is good cake. So if we want to get that desired result, if we check it before and if we do it while doing the process, we can actually fix it, we can modify it to get it. So assessment for learning also serves the same purpose. It serves the same purpose because if while teaching, if you are checking in between, if you are assessing your students, you will come to know where is the problem and how can I fix it, by either reteaching the concept or redesigning the teaching strategies. So these are the major 3 types of assessments I can say. I hope I answered.
Thank you. And I think your bake a cake example just brought me back to my nervous days. When I bake a cake, I'm nervous. I'm really nervous because I don't know how my cake's going to turn out. And even though I keep checking, and then I wonder whether my checking spoiled it or what's going to happen. So I probably feel I can identify with somebody who doesn't know how to fix it, but is nervous of the end result. So I guess I'm going to...
Same thing is with teachers.
That's what I'm saying. Exactly. So yeah, Nishal, would you like to add to this in terms of what's the purpose of assessments, what's the importance of, questions? Yeah, from your angle. Thanks.
I think I completely agree with this analogy that Ranjana ma'am gave, especially in context of assessments for learning. And yeah, I think in my view, I think assessments have a very crucial role to play in the entire teaching learning cycle. And the process itself is incomplete without assessments. But we strongly believe that an assessment is not just the gate just before the destination, right? It's a vehicle which can aid in reaching the destination. I think that's important for all of us to appreciate. So, and like any good diagnostic medical test, right? I mean, we go through, or any individual who goes through a medical test, the test itself is very crucial because it has to identify a certain level of whatever the test is supposed to do. And based on that diagnosis, of course, the remediation is based. And like that, I think if we take the same analogy and extend it to assessments in our context, I think the questions form the heart of a good assessment, right? So the quality of the questions, how good the questions are, that will determine the kind of insights that a teacher can get out of the assessments. And we cannot underestimate the power of these good questions. So yeah, I think it does take effort, time in building good assessments. And I think it deserves, and we should give the time that it deserves to create those good assessments. But I think the insights that they can reveal can really provide that fuel to the teacher, which can help in changing the learning levels of students. And yeah, I think to sum it up, I think assessments are to teachers like a diagnostic test is to a doctor, right? I mean, our teachers are our learning doctors. And I think if like what assessments can do, what a diagnostic test can do to a doctor, the same thing assessments can do for the teachers.
Yes, and we do have specialized diagnostic tests, right? It depends on which part of the body that you want to, address, and that's why you either go. I come from a household of radiologists, so and that's completely diagnostic, right? So that defines in terms of whether you want an MRI or a CT scan or an X-ray or a path lab report. So absolutely agree that in your for your analogy. Thanks for focusing on that. And we'll come back also, Nishal, to the the thing that you spoke about questions, in terms of saying that questions are very important, and we could probably also look at the kind of questions that should be there in an assessment and the impact of the same. And we'll come back to that a little later, so let's hang on to that one. Sangeeta, we'd love to hear from you about your journey in assessments in your school, because there has been you have tried out, right? I mean, you are what most of the you're a state board school, right? And a state board school is governed by a lot of state board, nomenclature about what kind of assessments and when to do, what to do, all of that. So if you can tell us a little about your journey at St. Joseph's in terms of how is the assessment structure, what do you do, how have you been able to sail through earlier pre-COVID and of course the most challenging COVID period and what lies ahead. So let's hear it from you in totality.
Thanks, Neha, for that. And I completely agree with what Ranjana ma'am said. And really, the example of Baker Cake was simply marvelous. I think we all are going to remember that as we go away from here. So yes, rightly said, we are a state board school and with lots of rules and regulations holding us. But I am very thankful that we are a Don Bosco group of schools. So the Salesian presence takes us forward like how. So it's a very forward-looking group, and therefore anything new that comes up, and if it is even told to us that is good for children, it's taken up. So when this came to us some 4-5 years back, that's the pre-COVID times, we were still into the same thing of having pen and paper tests, the learning of assessment at the end of the year or the middle of the year. And what happens is, by the time we correct the papers and we give the marks to the children, there is no going back and saying, where did we go wrong? Or where is that lacuna there in the children that they did not understand these concepts? And how are we going to remediate it? Because the term is over. You cannot revisit that at that point of time. And also another thing is that when we are doing for learning, that okay, we are having our formal assessment. So we were doing the same thing of group work and collaborative work and presentations, PowerPoint presentations that the children were giving. Yet when we came across this detailed assessment, we literally jumped into it and said that, yes, we are going to try out. I remember the first year when we took it up, the questions were of a level which our state board kids were crying, the teachers were crying more. Is that what kind of a test is this that the children are doing so, not so well. And that's the time then we said, no, we have to go forward with it and see how we can bring them to into focus of these three aspects of tracking them, getting the learning gaps, identifying the learning gaps, and remediation. So if I may share a small PPT to take us through this. I will have to.
Sure, you have the sharing rights.
Yes, but it's disappeared from here, so I will have to go back to my. Sorry.
Do you want me to share it?
No, I think I'll get it quickly enough.
Okay.
Yeah, there. So is my screen now visible?
Yes. If you can just put it on the slide.
Yeah, I'll just take a minute.
So Sangeeta, do tell us about what the detailed assessment
Right.
is about and
right. So as the word says, it's
yeah.
detailed assessment. So what are the expectations from this detailed assessment? Is that the teacher understands the level of understanding that the students possess, not just what the teaching has been about. Then you identify the learning gaps, identify the misconceptions that the student has carried with them. So to give an example, which will come a little later, I'm just repeating it right now, is which are the various organs of excretion. So organs of excretion, someone might just say intestines. So is it the correct one? So that's the point of misconceptions. And after the test is done, the remediation which comes with it. How does it benefit the stakeholders? The principal, of course,
gets a consolidated report and knows throughout the sections what is happening in each class. The impact of the usage is also known. The parent involvement also comes through from the report that is given to the principal. For the teacher gets a test immediately within 24 hours. So if she doesn't have to sit and correct, she doesn't have to do anything at all. The next day, after the test is conducted, she's got the reports in her hand. Which child has got how many marks and in which area has he not performed well? That's very important. In which area has he or she not performed very well? So she gets time for class discussions, does remediations immediately. The student, of course, gets a customized report and he can compare his report with the others in the class and it can retry the test if he wants to. The parents, of course, get an email update that this is what the marks that this child has got. Now, this gives you a kind of a view of where do I stand as a student? What are the concepts that I've understood very well because of the scoring of the test? So I know that the green flag tells me that that's the one which I know best about. And the other two are the ones which I need to study a little more. If you see the marks is not much of a difference, so there is no red flag. But if my score was pretty low in any of the topics, there would have been a red flag to show that that's an area I need to work more on.
So just to ask a question here, Sangeeta, is that these questions are based on the topic, right?
Yes,
of
yes.
The chapters, the
Yes.
topic that they are learning.
Yes.
And are these given after like every chapter or like what?
No.
If you can just describe the
Sure.
nature of the detailed assessment to understand that how
When do
are
we
they and how are these assessments like administered? I think that would just help everybody to understand and where do you get it from, you know, and how have you kind of got hold of it?
So educational initiatives got in touch with us and they gave us this. So we have a contact person through which we go ahead. And what is done first is that our school books, so whether you're a state board or a CBSE board or any board, your textbooks are mapped to the question. So the mapping is done and the chapters are linked towards it. And then we as a school decide in a term, we are allowed to take 3 assessments. So 6 in a year, 3 assessments in a term. Let's talk term wise. So in that term of 3 assessments that we are allowed to take, we as a school can choose any of the topics, not just one chapter. We can take 2-3 chapters together. That's completely dependent on the school to decide which chapters you want to take. Do you want to club them together? Do you want to keep it separate? Initially, it is better to keep it separate because the results do not come well at all. So, you know, you really will struggle in the first year of what's happening. So it's best to keep one chapter at that time. But as you get better with it, add 2 chapters because the questions are really good. And today, you know that CBSE and ICSE, their first term exams of 10th standard is MCQ based. So the world is there with MCQs and these are all MCQ questions. So it helps, it really helped our state board children to be on par. Today, I can proudly say that our 10th standards are on par with them. They know what a concept-based question is because the questions are all concept-based. They are not from the textbook or anything of that kind. So that answers, I suppose, your question of how do we go ahead. And so here were the red flags, which tells me that this child or this class is not doing well in place values and that needs to be revisited. Now, this is an important part of the detailed assessment. The critical questions, the recommended questions, and the optional questions. So we look at only the critical questions. When now in a class of 30, majority of them have got question number 1 wrong, it will be highlighted as a critical question. So in this case, in this slide, you can see that there are 7 critical questions. As a teacher, the teacher knows that 7 concepts is not clear with the children. As a principal, you know that this class, this teacher needs to be followed up to see that all the concepts are cleared before they can move on to the next one. And the time factor is very important. So within 24 hours, you've got this result. You know that you have to visit them. Next day in class, you can visit and get your remediation done. To give you an example of this, this is one question. I think this above panel is hiding. Are you able to see the question now?
Yeah, we are able to see it. We are able to see the entire slide.
Okay, fine. Thanks. John's gym trailer, 12 points for the day he exercises and minus 15 for the days he does not exercise. And as you can see that option 4, 36, majority, 56% of the class have gone to it. Obviously, this becomes critical. Why is it critical? These are the explanation why it could be critical. These are the suggested remedial actions which are there. I'm not reading through it because that would take a lot of time. Is that, and the concepts are understood, that is just not 12 into the 4 days that the person has worked. That's why he's got those points. 12 into 3 is 36. No, he's forgotten integer addition, subtraction. So that becomes a critical questions to be looked at. This is another example that I was talking about. And there the suggested remedial method is mentioned, that you have to revisit to talk about excretion and egestion, 2 important functions of digestion. But if you do not understand the concept between the difference between them, you are not going to be able to answer the question. This gives you a picture of where your class is. So there's just one child who's got 7.5, which is the maximum. You know how much more you have to work on. And if the class average is 5.5, the principal might want to tell the teacher, let's get them to get higher marks. So this is detailed assessment. If any questions, I can answer them.
Yeah. So detailed assessment is of course mapped to the chapter. Yes. And what we understand from what Ms. Sangeeta actually shared was the fact that the teachers get almost real-time responses on the student performance. Right. And are also guided by the assessment to say exactly what it guides their teaching, right? So in terms of what's the gap, where is the, which concept isn't clear, and maybe if you could do it in this manner, this is, if this is what could be done, then this is how it would help. Yeah, I think what I'd like to do at this point in time, is just take a 30-second pause here. And if all of us can just think about what we just saw in terms of, the question, the responses, the analysis of the response, the graph, and maybe put down your observation about what do you think about that. Any questions that you have directed to Sangeeta or Nishchal or anyone, just put them down or even voice it. We'll take the questions a little later, but let's not lose what we have just heard. So 30-second pause. Yeah, so if there are any other observations of what you saw, anybody who's doing similar work also, you could definitely share. Yeah, we have one question, which was, of course, I asked about, do you substitute the unit exams with these detailed assessments? The state board has unit tests. So do you substitute it, or are these in addition, Sangeeta?
We do not substitute it, but we take it as one of the formal assessment tools. So okay. It goes as part of our formative, not formal, formative assessments, simply because too many tests, the teachers were getting very anxious that how are we going to be able to do that many. So just to ease their mind, because we thought that detailed assessment is more important, so we put it as a formative assessment tool.
Great, thank you. I asked that one because that was a short one as a response. We have 2 more questions. Is the questions are designed by some outside agency or by the teacher herself? If we can answer that, and we'll take the other questions towards the end, because I know that that can be answered by others.
Sure. So yes, it is not done by us, by the teacher. It is done by the outside agency, that is the educational initiatives who does it. And that's where Nischal's part where he spoke about the importance of the question framing. That's very important, is how the question is framed. If you had just glanced through that, you'd see the questions are not direct questions. You really have to read through the question, you have to understand the questions, and then you'll be able to answer it. And yes, it's in English, math, science initially. Now they have brought in Hindi and social studies also.
Okay, great. So we'll come back to these questions, which are on how do you convince parents and teachers that less marks is okay. Absolutely, yeah, because we are more marks driven than effort driven. So we'll look at that. And Ekta, yes, it seems to be a formative assessment that helps to forecast, predict the performance in annual results. Okay, so let's hang on to that as well. And at this point, I'm going to ask Suranjana to also kind of share her school journey in assessments. What are the innovative practices that you've got into, your school, and how has that helped student learning? And do let us know about what's even happening currently. Yeah.
See, just
Yeah, no worries. You can.
I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Yeah. So before I talk about that, what we have done in our school, especially in COVID, I would like to talk about some of the challenges which we faced with respect to assessment. Last year, we all know that when COVID outbreak was there, so we all, I mean, not my school, every school actually faced problem in terms of conducting classes and then later on assessment as well. So thankfully, we were already equipped with the online teaching platform when lockdown started. So it didn't take time for us to shift to online mode of learning. We started in the month of April itself, but the only challenge which was faced by us was the assessment. So the reason is you can't really rely on the virtual assessment as there is no validity. Children are not here sitting at home, they write their papers, so there is no validity of the assessment. The pattern of assessment was to be changed. We changed the pattern of assessment because here it was descriptive when they were in the school pre-COVID. Children of lower classes, they were not able to write descriptive responses sitting at home. So we had to use MCQ. Then the challenge was to frame quality MCQ questions, as just now Nischal said and Sangeeta also shared. So because, MCQ can be very helpful actually in gauging the learning objectives, but only if they are designed very thoughtfully. Teachers were not used to of designing thinking-based MCQ questions because they were more used to of descriptive type of questions. So this was another challenge. And then another reason for designing smart question or quality question was to prevent students of copying and asking, Google. I mean, if you ask MCQ and they get answer from Google, this was happening. And it is not only in our school, and I think almost in all the schools. So I told my teachers, you have to be smarter than Google, in fact. So you have to frame such type of questions for which Google also doesn't have answer. So restructuring the questions, So these kinds of challenges, in fact, we faced. Another challenge, very big challenge, in fact, was to how to identify the learning gaps, because assessment is the way to identify, but as I said, assessment were not very reliable and valid. So how to find that gap? And I'm sure all the schools must have faced similar challenges during COVID. But then we thought of some solutions. We thought of how to overcome these challenges. Definitely, we did a lot of brainstorming and we tried our best to make the assessments valid, reliable. So what best we can do to overcome these challenges? We did all these. Of course, we used MS Forms, tried framing smart questions, conducted workshop for teachers how to frame good questions, and did invigilation also by asking children to keep their cameras on, used proctored examination system as well, and used some alternative methods, in fact, to understand the learning level of students. Open book exams were conducted, use of formative assessment more often we did, and we involved parents also. For some exams, we requested parents to drop their answer books at the school gate, and just to give writing practice to students and not to always attempt the MCQ type of questions. Then ESSET also we conducted online, which really helped us engaging the learning outcomes. As questions framed by ESSET are thinking-based questions, higher thinking order skill-based questions, it helped us to understand the learning gaps. Because as I said, those types of questions children cannot Google, they cannot get the answers, ready-made answers from anywhere. So that is why ESSET actually helped us a lot. Now, here I would like to talk more about ESSET. We started in our school, in fact, ESSET, using ESSET for our students since 2013, in fact. So it's a long journey. What does ESSET, what is the meaning actually of it, and what this exam does? In fact, it measures students' conceptual learning or understanding of concepts, that how much deeper understanding children have. And it also supports, in turn, school to understand the level of learning, along with benchmarking at various levels. All our students in our school from classes 3rd to 10th, they take ESSET, which helps us to understand where we stand with respect to other schools and other students at national and zonal levels. Now, there are some insights which are given by the ESSET, which ESSET provides to the school and teachers. To be more specific, it provides 3 major insights. First is benchmarking. How are our students performing as compared to other schools? So this insight is given by ESSET. Which are the areas of strengths and which are the areas of improvement? So this information or this data is actually provided when we go for ESSET. Then the second insight is, it gives the most important, actually a point, most important insight, that is about misconceptions, that the misconceptions which are developed by students. Do students have conceptual understanding, or they have developed some sort of misconceptions about the topic? Are there any learning gaps? So all that can be checked with the help of ESSET. Here I would like to share one small interesting experience of my own. In one of this actually I saw one video on ESSET on EI website, in fact. Then I thought, let me try in my class also. So in 2nd standard, once I went in the 2nd standard class, they were learning shapes. So I drew on the board one triangle with vertex downward. So the base was at the top and vertex was towards the ground. So I asked questions. I asked question to students that what is this shape? Everybody was answering. Many of them, they said it is cone. And then, but nobody said it is triangle. And then one child said, it is ulta triangle, ma'am. So then I came to know that really there is a problem, because students' minds are so conditioned that whenever teacher teaches in the class, whenever they draw triangle in the class, always, most of them, they draw with the vertex towards top and base towards the down. So never they draw triangle in any other way. So children, they don't know that triangle can be drawn in different way also. So that is why one child said ulta triangle, though it is a triangle. So these kinds of misconceptions which are developed in the class, if the right teaching strategy is not used, and how to identify these misconceptions, asset helps us a lot. Then the third insight which is given, it is very helpful to teachers to understand the learning gaps and strengths of the children. What is to be done? Is it required to modify teaching strategies and instructions to fill gaps and clear the misconceptions, or reteach certain concepts again? There are reports. So those reports are like, lighthouse for teachers, which help them to identify the direction to which they must go for better understanding of the concepts. So these are very important insights which we get using asset. Then there are certain reports which are given by the asset, and these reports basically are three different types of reports are given by asset, individual reports. The first one is teacher's report. It is a report on the performance of her class, how the class where the teacher is teaching has performed in the test. And then second is student's report. Individual student gets report. It is a comprehensive report highlighting students' academic strengths and weaknesses and recommendations, then what the child has to do for the improvement. So strengths, weaknesses, recommendations, examples, and the way ahead. All this is given to the child to move ahead for improvement. And the third type of report which we get is the management report, which is again a very comprehensive report which helps to understand the performance of the entire school. And it gives a lot of insight. In fact, it gives benchmarking, it gives the comparison where our school stands, where our children stand in terms of concepts, in terms of skills, and what exactly is to be done. So I would like to little talk about here the management report. So the management report actually contains all these things: national benchmarking with respect to all the classes. As I said, we have asset for all the classes right from 3rd to 10th. So we get the national benchmarking. In this, we get how many students, or what is the percentage of students, those who score above average, below national average, or they are at par with the national average. So subject wise, class wise, we get these benchmarking. Then national percentile, we get class wise. National benchmarking, section wise we get. Then regional benchmarking, or whichever zone or metro we are located at, we get that also. State benchmarking we get. And performance of the batch, I mean children, year on year, that also we get. What was the performance of the child last year? What is the performance this year? Whether it is improved, not improved, and what is to be done for improvement. All that is given in the management report. So I would like to show you a sample here. This is what exactly is given in the management report. As I just now shared with you, all these benchmarkings are given in the management report, class wise, section wise. If you see, there is a separate page for the principal to understand the performance of all the classes, along with benchmarking. So insight is given in the report that performance of which classes is better and which classes the performance is lower than the national average, and what is to be done. So, and this is given subject wise, and that too along with the comparison with last year. Like this year, this is the performance, and last year, what was the performance of the same students of the school in particular subject. And then it also gives the details about top performers, how many students, what is the percentage of student, or how many students performed, at the top, how many are, three levels, three different levels, we get the number of students. So this also helps us to understand how many students come under top category and how many are below, how many are at par with the national average. And this is how we can work on it, and we can plan our strategies accordingly. So this is another next page, that is national benchmarking with respect to classes. So next page, please. Yes, thank you. No, the next one. So if you see here, the green color boxes, green color means it is above national average. You see everywhere here it is 114, 102, 104, 115. Please.
Is it the next one that you need?
No, ma'am, previous one. Previous one.
Okay, okay. It's this
Before,
one, right?
Before this.
This one. That's the letter to the principal.
Where there are three columns with yes, 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 yes. Yes, please. Three columns with green color.
It's this one, right? Your national benchmarking classes.
Correct, correct. Thank you. So if you see here, we get class-wise, subject-wise details, the percentage of students falling under which category. So red color means below national average, green color means above national average. If you see here in this sample, all are above 100. So it shows that it is above national average. If anywhere it is less than 100, it shows it is below national average. So that gives us an insight that yes, where do we stand with respect to the schools who are participating in asset at national level. Next slide. Next slide is about national benchmarking with respect to sections. So every section in my school, third A, third B, third C, right till 10th, we get section-wise benchmarking, that where do a particular division stands with respect to national average. For example, here the first row, if you see third A, all boxes are green. So it means everywhere the performance of third A is in every subject more than the national average. In third B, the situation is not good. Everywhere in every subject, it is red. So it means it is below the national average. Third C, third D, like that, I will come to know, the principal will come to know that exactly where we need to, and then we can go back, check that what exactly was the problem with third B, what was the reason for this kind of performance, and then accordingly remediation can be done, the improvement steps can be taken. So this is about national benchmark with regard to sections. The next slide is about year-on-year analysis. This is again very, very important slide. Ma'am, next slide.
This is the one of year-on-year, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
In which different color boxes are there?
Yes, I have put that in.
Okay, fine. So year-on-year analysis, you can see we get Here, the same batch of students, we come to know how are they performing in this year and how did they perform last year. If you see here, the example, for example, in standard 4, last year the percentage was 115% and here it is 110. So there is an increase as compared to last year of 5%. So different categories are defined here. If the increase is more than 7%, it is defined by green color. Then increase is between 3 to 7, or there may be a decrease also. If there is decrease, then so this is a very very important insight, in fact, for a principal, for a school leader to understand that where which class stands and what is to be done and what was the reason. Then we can analyze the reasons, we can find out the root cause and accordingly take actions to fix up this kind of a gap. And again next year we can check with the same batch of students whether there is an improvement or no improvement, whether the remediation or the steps which are taken for improvement worked or did not work.
Yeah, I think that's really comprehensive in terms of the table that we are seeing.
Yes. So this is how actually asset helped us. I can say that especially in COVID, it was really reliable and very valid, because as I said, the type of questions, the quality of questions is very good. So students, if they know the concepts, if they are they have deeper understanding about the concept, then only they can attempt, they can do those questions and we can get clear idea that where exactly they stand. So in those terms, asset really helped us, especially in COVID. So that's it from my side. In the next slide, I have just given a kind of
that's a real nice one. And that reminds me, when I was in school and my dad used to ask me who's the president of some country, or sometimes even our own country, and I would say, they didn't teach me in history, come on, don't ask me these kind of questions, so it's like I think yes, this definitely holds true.
Yeah. So this is what I thought. I found it very interesting. I thought I'll just share with all of you. So that's it. I hope we will make the assessments meaningful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the detailed, understanding of how data would help us and would help teachers as well as, the principals. Burning question that I have right now, and I'm sure that's going on in many people's mind, is how do you manage to do that? How, and that's a question to both the educators, even though Nishchal may want to answer that right now, is that how do you see, you have this much of data that comes in, there are reports, and we all know that these reports help us, right? And they help us to guide, but it all does take time. It means we need to look at the reports, we need to make sense of it, we need to inform our own teaching, our lesson plans. So one is at the teacher level, one is at the leader level. And that's not something that we all have been used to doing. So if you can tell us as to how, and some maybe ways in which you manage to, how long does it take? Yeah, some of those things.
See,
yeah, and I'm going to spotlight you as well as Sangeeta, so that we hear it from both of you. Yes, please go ahead.
Fine. So, as I said, when we analyze these reports, we get the insights, then we plan that the remediation. Now, I'll tell you, the remediation happens only if teachers are trained. They know how to, if I want my students to attempt thinking-based questions and concept-based questions, my teachers have to teach also in the same manner. I mean, teaching methodology need to undergo a change, and automatically I feel assessment and marks, I mean, then any kind of questions you ask, children will be able to answer. So that is the area where we actually, you can say, that is the target area, I feel, where we give lot of training to our teachers. We try to, bring a kind of change in the mindset, the way they look at teaching strategies, the way they teach in the class. I always tell them, you need to speak less and your students need to speak more. And they have to, this myth, we have to break, that teachers always speak in the class. So,
That's true, and very true that assessments can also lead to a change in pedagogy, right? And that's highly possible, and that's possible through this route. Sangeeta, can we get to know how long did it take for your teachers to get adjusted to this new way of assessments? What are the challenges that you faced while doing that?
In our first year, and I'm just talking about pre-COVID times right now, it was really difficult. As I mentioned earlier, that the marks were really sad, and the students were feeling bad about it. The teachers were feeling bad about it. Like, we just don't want this. This is too difficult. We just don't want it. But we had to keep behind it and cajole them. And yes, the education initiative helped us also first to understand. So when you get the data and you're not used to reading data, you don't even understand what the data talk about. So first of all, they came in, they handhold us to understand what the data says, what do you have to do about it. So there was a lot of handholding from their end. And once that happened, we said that we don't want analysis now. We understood, we will analyze it. You come and give us trainings on how do we do the remediation, how do we do, as Ranjana rightly said, is that how do you teach in that manner by which it automatically becomes a part of the learning process, where they can then answer the questions the way it is supposed to be answered. So a lot of that did happen. Trainings from our end, trainings from, sometimes we did get training from the DA end. So that's how we went further. But I must say the pandemic has changed everything. In that 1 year, what we wouldn't have gone ahead with 10 years of learning, we have managed it in 1 year of learning so many flip grids and puzzles, and Adhyayan helped our hand in doing so many of them. Now the teachers are more open, and now it's like, okay, we'll do it, because this year we did it online. DA happened online. Last year we could not do it. We were just overwhelmed with all the things that was happening. But this year we went over online, and it did work out. And yes, the teachers are now more open towards it. There's lot more training happening from our end. So it is actually the teacher trainings which is helping the process to go further.
So true. And are you experiencing, are you using this to address the learning gaps right now? Like post, I can't say post-COVID, sorry, but post-reopening of schools. And this is again to both the schools in terms of, are the teachers using it actively right now and are able to use it as a diagnostic? Have you started doing it already is my question actually.
So you mean other than what we are talking about right now, the detailed assessments, right?
No, the detailed assessments and asset that the two schools are using. See, the schools have just reopened, right? Sometime back. So have you administered these diagnostics online already, or are you doing it right now after the schools have reopened? Like, what's the plan of how to use it to address these gaps? We understand that these gaps will be addressed in this manner, but where are you on it in this year? Have you kind of started it?
So we already administered, first term is over, so we have already administered 3 of the tests.
Okay, so you did it online.
We did it online. We are actually waiting for the next one, and we take it for your 3rd to the 8th standard. We don't take it for the higher classes. So it's already done. And as I said, the results have not been too bad, but we know that the learning gaps are still there. So there are other methods which we are using to
address those gaps.
Yeah, to address.
Okay, but the first step is to know where we are, right? To understand what the gaps are, to be able to even do something about it.
Right, absolutely.
Right. And Ranjana, in your school as well, have you all administered the asset for this year or the asset test?
Yes, Neha, last year also we conducted.
Oh, you did it even during the COVID.
Yes, last year also we did. This year also we are going for it, because for us it is one time in a year. It is not like detailed assessment that you
Right.
have 6 times in a year. So we conduct it once, but we are going for it. And last year also conducted.
Great. That's super. And I'm sure that I would say, let's keep the chat alive. And if you have questions and observations, do put them in. Because I'm going to bring in Nishtal at this point in time, as both Ranjana and Sangeeta spoke about questions and the kind of questions. And I think we're eager to understand what those questions are, the kind of questions, because that's informing remediation, that's informing the change in lesson plans, the change in pedagogy. So it'll be really interesting to know that. And Nishal, if you could also introduce educational initiatives, just letting us know a little about the work that you do and the expanse of work, it'll help the audience as well.
Sure. Thanks, Neha. I hope everyone is able to see the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, quickly about EI. We've been working in the education space for over 20 years now. From day one, our vision has been to create a world where children everywhere are learning with understanding. And I think that remains the core focus of our work. Like whatever we do, it has to answer this central question: are students learning with understanding, yes or no? And we strongly believe that there are two things which can play a very critical role in this, and we try to leverage that. So one is the cutting edge educational research, which is how do we use the data that is coming in from the assessments or whatever students are attempting, make sense of that learning data to understand and go deeper into how students learn. And the second thing is, how do you use technology? Because we strongly believe that technology is going to revolutionize the way students learn. And I think we are seeing this already in our day-to-day life. So using these two, which is cutting edge educational research and technology-based learning solutions, we use these two as tools to create solutions which help going deep into understanding how students learn. And we've been working in this space across like different types of schools, whether it's government schools, private schools, irrespective of the demography of students, students coming from affluent backgrounds, students coming in from lower socioeconomic background. So we've been working in this space across these different places and like geographies as well, in India, outside India. The question that really troubles us and at the same time is also inspires us in building what we do or creating solutions that we create. The question that troubles us, like one of the questions is like, why is it that as a society we are able to make better phones every 3 months? Right? I mean, we keep hearing about newer phones, bigger screen size, better chips, better this, better that. Every 3 months, you will probably see a newer version of your same company phone or a newer operating system. But we are not able to make that kind of progress when it comes to, say, children learning. I mean, a lot of us, we went through a certain kind of schooling system, and we do see such schools still existing, and a lot of students still go through similar learning systems. So why is it that we are able to make progress on certain fronts, but not when it comes to education? And I think this is one question, and not just, I mean, mobile industry is just one kind of industry, but we see that in almost many other industries. Why is it that we are able to make progress there, not in education? So this really troubles us. And another is, I mean, why is it that, like, if we take again like the analogy of medicine, why is it that we are okay with standardized treatment in case of education, but we are not okay with that in case of, say, medicine, right? We cannot imagine a world where doctor is just like not listening to us and starts prescribing medicine, right? We cannot imagine or going to a doctor like that. And imagine a doctor who is well trained, who knows the field well, but still continues to do such practice and does that can you imagine, like, you are sitting in like a group and the doctor is prescribing medicine to you without or even like understanding the background about yourself, understanding the symptoms, or even like prescribing certain tests which help them understand things better. So why is it that we are not okay with that when it comes to medicine, but we are okay with that sort of standardized treatment when it comes to education? And these are the kind of questions which really trouble us.
Yes, Nishal, if I may just come in at this point, I think I'm just going to, I have my eyes on the time as well.
Sure.
So I'm just going to ask you to exactly continue from your last statement with saying that we are okay with the kind of standardized questions, and actually take us through some of that in terms of what makes these questions, difficult. I mean, I would say special or different, and how that's helping. Because I know we want to take a couple of questions that are there. Yeah,
definitely. I'll probably jump directly to questions in so I think the core of it, like I was describing earlier also, is the kind of questions that we ask. And we can only uncover student learning by asking the right kind of questions, right? If we take typical questions that we find in exam papers, and there's just a few examples on the topic of electricity, like what is electric current? Electromotive force is defined as dash. These are typical questions that we come across in school exam papers, right? But do they really tell us whether students have understood or not? I don't know. So what we did was we took this topic of electricity and we went down to what is the core understanding that students should develop. And we asked this question to class 10 students. And the question says, see this picture of a typical torch bulb. It can be lighted using a battery and 2 wires as shown here. So it shows an image where there's a battery, there are 2 wires connected to the bulb. And it says it can be lighted using this way. Now the question is it possible to light the same bulb using the same battery, but with only 1 wire instead of 2 wires? And the condition is the wire cannot be cut into 2 smaller wires. You cannot cut the wire into 2 wires. You can only use 1 single wire, a battery and a bulb. Can you do that? Yes or no? And of course, there were 4 options given, which is first one says no, because 2 wires are needed to complete the circuit. No, because the bulb will get fused if you try to light it without 2 wires. Yes, but the bulb will have to be kept touching the battery directly. And the fourth, yes, but each end of the wire must touch one end of the battery. So we asked this question to class 10 students, and to our surprise, only 30% were able to answer the question correctly. Right? I mean, this is possible if you have only 1 wire. The bulb and the one terminal of the bulb should be touching the battery directly. I mean, this is possible to do. But to our surprise, 48%, almost half the students thought that 2 wires are needed, and without that, this cannot be done. Right? And these are class 10 students, and electricity as a concept is introduced right from grade 6, grade 7 onwards. So this is not something new. And this comes down to the fundamental understanding of electricity, right? That you need a complete circuit for the electrical current to flow, and in this case, the bulb to glow. But that understanding is missing, which means that students have not really understood and have moved on to solving advanced numericals and all. And there also they may be probably struggling, right? So when you ask a question like this, it's only then that you can actually reveal what students are actually thinking. There's a video which, if there is time, we can come back to this, which talks about, I mean, not just school students. This is like graduates from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which is one of the premier institutes in the world. Students over there also struggle with such concepts, and it talks about some of the root causes. We'll probably move to so what makes questions effective, right? If we talk about typical questions and good questions, what makes questions effective? So let's see these 2 examples, right? On the left, you see a question which says, what is the perimeter of this rectangle? There's a rectangle given, the sides are marked, and the student has to find the perimeter. Versus a question which says, which of these shapes have a perimeter? So there are 3 shapes given. One has only straight sides, one is closed but has curved sides, and the third is straight sides but it is open. And it says, which of these shapes have a perimeter? Any preferences between these 2 questions?
Yeah, the first one is straight and simple. Yeah, I know the answer.
Right. Yeah, I think what happens is when you ask the first question, the students typically do it. Yeah. You will find that majority 70-80%, because they know the formula to calculate and they know how to do it in this case where the sides are marked. But the same students, when they see the second question, they are not able to do it, right? And like we saw this data, only 40% were able to do it. And like 34% students selected only shape 1. And it's interesting because when we actually went to the students and interacted with them, we found out the reason, the root causes. So what students say is, it's only when the shape is closed and has straight sides you can calculate. So shape 2, it is closed, but because the sides are curved, you cannot calculate the perimeter in that case. And if you see like option D, which is only shapes 1 and 3, 16%. Again, they think that straight sides are needed, whether that is closed or open doesn't matter. And these are the students who we have this misconception. So I think effective questions at the end test for understanding of concepts beyond just like a procedural understanding. I think that's where we need to have these sort of questions also. So while the left question is like, you should definitely have that, the kind of questions, the right side, that is the kind of question which definitely should be there in your assessment. Just so one more example, like if you see the question on the left, it says the gravitational pull on the moon is dash of that of the earth. And there are options given 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, 1/6. The right side says if you are standing on the moon holding a pen and you let it go, it will dash. So it will float away, it will float where it is, it will fall to the ground or float towards the earth. Now, students as a fact in the textbook are like taught that gravity on the moon is 1/6 that of the earth. And it's like a fact which is like ingrained again and again. And students really like mug that up and can produce that fact. But the same students who need to understand what gravity is cannot answer this question, which is like, if you're standing on the moon, they answer the first question. They know that it is 1/6 that of the earth, which means they know that moon has gravity, which means if you drop a pen on the moon, it will still fall down. But they're not able to answer this question, right? I mean, data indicates that only 15% answer it correctly. 85% cannot answer this question correctly. And majority also think that it will float away. And of course, when you go to the root causes, they're like interesting reasons why they think it will not fall to the ground. But effective questions at the end of the day should uncover such like understanding, and whether students superficially understand or do they really understand the concept and the kind of misconceptions that they harbor. So good question, effective question should be able to do this. And not going into this example, but typically if we use real life authentic contexts, it can really test whether students can apply a learned concept which they've understood in that context. And the context should be such that students can relate to it, they find interesting, engaging. And then I think you can effectively test application as well. But yeah, I mean, just to summarize, I think good questions can lead to effective diagnosis, which is the identification of gaps. And once you identify the exact gap, that's when I think you can take action, remediation, which can lead to learning. And I think that's where the role of good questions is extremely critical. Just to, I think, quickly go through, like NEP 2020 also has a variety of things, out of which one of the key things that it talks about is transforming assessment. It's going to become a key central piece in the education reforms that we're going to see as well. And it talks about transforming assessment. And 3 things that it highlights in the NEP 2020 is that assessments will shift from one that is summative and testing rote memorization to formative and more competency-based testing higher order skills. Board exams will be redefined to encourage holistic development, and they will test primarily core competencies rather than months of coaching and memorization. And the last is all students will take school examinations in 358, which will be conducted by appropriate authority. But I think in essence, what it is saying is that we need to move away from rote memorization to understanding and application-based assessments. And somewhere, I think if you see this board examination, it's like your goal post, right? I mean, so far, because the board examinations are designed in a certain way, we all are moving towards that. But the moment you change that goal post to say something which is more understanding-based, application-based, I think we all will adopt that, and we'll have to move towards preparing our students to become competent in that domain as well. So yeah, I think these are just some remote resources that we created in the times of COVID. I think schools, we really appreciate the way they've handled the situation in the past 1.5 year and are still doing it. And I think since we've also worked with the government schools, we understand the kind of challenges that they've also gone through. And some of the resources which we've created, a lot of this is available for free. AQAD, a lot of you may be aware of the third one, which is asset question a day. But every day, one thought-provoking question is given to students. It's like students can access it can answer, can even provide their explanation. And teachers can use it to engage students in discussion around what their answer is, why do they think in a certain way. The first one is essential concept. This is a document which we released, helping to prioritize learning outcomes. If I have, say, 30 different things to cover, typically, if I have limited time, what can I focus on? So it lists down topic-wise, class-wise, subject-wise essential concepts. There are misconception posters, and I've shown a vernacular one, but I mean, they're available in English also. These are like one-page posters for teachers to quickly understand what a misconception is, what can they do in their class.
Nishal, is it possible to put in the free resources link in the chat?
Sure. I think there's, unfortunately, they're all scattered. I'll be happy to share if you can drop a mail to me.
Okay, fine. We'll do that.
I'll just put this slide for a minute. It has my email ID. I will be more than happy to share some of these resources. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think what you really surfaced here was the fact that the scene is going to change because the goalpost, is what we need to change. And if we change the goalpost, I think the biggest question here is how are you going to convince the teachers and the parents? Because the goalpost changing is going to lead to it's a transition, it's a process. And as Sangeeta said that, people weren't happy initially because the marks were low. And we know that any change comes with its own ups and downs. So I guess this is again one point, and that was a question raised earlier also, that how do you convince, and I would say convince or rather carry your parents and teachers along with you? And that's a question to whoever would like to field it.
Yeah, if I can just add, I think here the transition has to be smooth. The transition has to be slow. It cannot be a 1-0 thing. But yesterday I had a certain kind of questions, and now I have all my questions this way. Slowly we'll need to move towards whether it's internal school examinations or you'll see that in board examinations too. A certain fraction of the questions slowly will start becoming this way, and eventually, of course, more and more questions will be understanding based. I think that's one approach.
Yeah, and that has already started, in fact, right? In the state board and CBSE, and definitely. As this time we've seen MCQs, in fact, in most of the exams. Any tips, Ranjana and Sangeeta, from you in terms of taking teachers and parents along?
I would like to add here that teachers' mindset need to undergo a change. That is the biggest thing. Not only teachers, in fact, parents as well. So I feel a lot of workshops, constant reinforcement, constant, monitoring and workshops on these kinds of topics, and the new age teaching strategies, methods, concept-based learning. All this is to be done at war footage kind of thing, because parents workshop and parents mindset also need to undergo a big change, because I remember when we started evaluation, we don't have exams for law classes. So my parents used to come and say, मेरे बच्चे के notebook में कुछ नहीं लिखा है. I said, कुछ नहीं लिखा है, but teacher is doing a lot of things in the class. Teachers are doing a lot of activities, children are learning, in fact, but notebook में तो कुछ नहीं है. I said, पर यहाँ तो लिखा है, that is more important than the notebook. But yes, it took little time for us to change the mindset of parents also, that learning is more important. Involvement of children is more important in the class, rather than just writing answers on the board and children just copy in the notebook and write in the exam, that's it. So where is the learning actually in this? So I think change in the mindset can be done only by constant reinforcement and a lot of workshops on these topics.
So training is the key in terms of professional development for teachers and parent education programs as well. And I think staying persistent definitely helps. Sangeeta, any parting thought from you before we close the session?
No, I completely agree. Teacher training is one part, but getting your parents on board I think that was a big challenge because they also would have to pay for it, and then they would see such low marks. So it took a lot of push from us that no, it's good for your children, and competitive exams is ultimately what they're going to answer. So we had to show them that goal over there, that that's where we want to go, and then bring them up to it. So parents, we found a bigger challenge. Teachers did agree after some time.
Yeah, and we have Hussein in the chat who's saying, along with teachers, it's the leaders also who need a lot of support and training. Very true, and I think that is. I am I'm a kind of prime example of that. When we I had administered asset in our school, and just like Ranjana was saying, that we had to first figure out, yes, it was quite a bit to understand the reports, because it suddenly seems like Greek and Latin first when you just look at it, and to understand that how can anybody get more than 100%, and then you start making sense of it. So definitely educating school leaders is definitely the first step. But what I understand is, from wherever you start, it's about making a start, and I think that is the most important thing to do. And I hope that today's session does at least ignite that spark, and leaves some food for thought for all of us to say that, okay, if assessments is also a way to change the pedagogy, to start moving towards what the national education policy is talking about, then what are the first steps that we need to take to make sure that the learning gaps in our students is being addressed? So I hope that Ms. Ranjana, Sangeeta, and Nishchal have left us and given us enough food for thought on our favorite topic, and I think every educator's favorite topic of assessments. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us, and we hope that we do interact soon to learn more and to know more from others as well. So thank you, and thank you for putting in your observations and questions on the chat. There is a feedback form, so do fill in that. And in fact, just before this session, we had a professional development session on questions, the art of questioning. And I think that's exactly what the whole conversation there was also about, what are the kind of questions that we need to ask? And such a simple word of a question, and it's such a loaded word again. So have a good weekend and the rest of the evening too. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.